There is a Zen saying, "The tighter you hold the rope, the deeper it cuts into your skin." Imagine holding a rope with all your strength, unwilling to let go. At first, it feels like control, like security. But as time passes, the pressure increases. The rope digs deeper, burning, cutting, leaving scars. And yet, the more pain you feel, the harder you grip, believing that holding on is better than facing the uncertainty of an open hand. This is the nature of attachment. Love, in its purest form, is a force of liberation, gentle, uplifting, free. It flows like a river, nourishing all that it touches without demanding anything in return. But when love becomes entangled with attachment, it transforms. It ceases to be a source of joy and instead becomes a weight, one that suffocates rather than sets free. Letting go of someone you love is never an easy decision, nor is it ever accepted without resistance. Even when you choose to walk away, the heart, much like the tide, pulls back, drawn by memories, by emotions, by the illusion that what once was should always be. But why do people struggle so much when they are cut off? Why do they refuse to let go? The mind craves permanence. It clings to the past, hoping to make it present. The ego whispers, "This should have lasted forever." But Buddhism teaches us a fundamental truth, anicca, impermanence. Everything changes. Nothing lasts forever. Yet, the suffering of separation does not arise from the loss itself. It arises from our resistance to this truth. We do not mourn only the person. We mourn the identity we had when we were with them. We fight against the current, believing we can hold back the inevitable tide. But what happens when we stop resisting? What happens when we allow life to move, just as the river flows effortlessly to the sea? To understand this, let us reflect on an ancient Zen parable, a story of love, detachment, and the quiet struggle that follows when one decides to walk away. As the traveler walked through the village, he tried to ignore the golden bird trailing behind him. It perched on rooftops as he passed, its melody weaving through the air, a song that once soothed him but now unsettled him. He covered his ears, walked faster, even changed his path, but no matter what he did, the bird remained. At first, he was merely frustrated, but as days turned into weeks, a deep unease settled within him. He had done what was right, hadn't he? He had freed the bird. He had made the choice to let go. Then why did its presence still linger? Why did he feel like he was being haunted by something he had already released? One evening, he found an elderly monk meditating beneath a great banyan tree. Desperate for an answer, the traveler approached him and explained his dilemma. "I do not understand," he confessed. "I have freed the bird. I have done my part. Why does it still follow me?" The monk smiled, his eyes filled with knowing. He plucked a leaf from the ground and held it in his palm. "Tell me," the monk said, "is this leaf still part of the tree?" The traveler frowned. "No, of course not. It has already fallen." The monk nodded. Then, with deliberate ease, he lifted the leaf to his nose and inhaled deeply. "But if I still hold the scent of the tree in my mind, have I truly let it go?" The traveler stood silent, the weight of the monk's words settling within him. He had let go of the bird in action, but not in essence. He had released it from his hands, but not from his heart. Just as the monk still held the scent of the tree, the traveler still held the imprint of the bird. And as long as he carried the warmth of its presence, the bird had no choice but to stay. People make the same mistake in relationships. They believe that cutting off contact is the same as letting go. They block numbers, avoid places, erase memories from their surroundings, thinking that distance alone will bring freedom. But detachment is not about running away. It is about release. The more we fight against attachment, the more entangled we become. True detachment is not about pushing someone away. It is about dissolving the invisible thread that binds us. Buddhism does not teach detachment through forceful rejection. It does not ask us to sever ties out of anger, nor to pretend we feel nothing. Instead, it teaches us to see things as they are, to recognize that all things, love, relationships, even pain, come and go like the changing seasons. And when we stop grasping, stop resisting, stop trying to force closure, something incredible happens. We no longer need to chase peace. It arrives on its own. And the golden bird, no longer feeling the pull of the traveler's heart, finally spreads its wings and flies away. The young man furrowed his brows, struggling to grasp the lesson. But if I have truly walked away, Why does their pain still persist? Why do they keep searching for something that no longer exists? The Zen master's eyes softened with understanding. He gestured toward the pond beside them, its surface undisturbed. Picking up a small stone, he dropped it into the water. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection of the sky above. "Do you see this disturbance?" the master asked. The young man nodded. "Now, what if I had thrown a much larger stone? Would the ripples take longer to settle?" The young man considered the question. "Yes, of course. The bigger the stone, the longer the waves last. And if someone stands in the water, trying to stop the ripples from fading, what happens then? They create even more waves." The master nodded. "This is how suffering continues. It is not just the loss that creates pain, it is the mind's refusal to let the ripples fade. The more we grasp, the more we struggle, and the more we struggle, the longer the suffering lingers. Across the world, countless people live in this struggle. There was once a woman who had loved a man deeply. He had been her world, her home, her sense of belonging. But one day, without warning, he left. No words, no explanation, just absence where once there was presence. She did not grieve his departure. She grieved the silence he left behind. She walked the same streets they once did, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. She whispered his name into the night, waiting for an echo. Every unanswered question burned in her mind like a candle that refused to go out. But she was not holding on to love. She was holding on to answers. The human mind detests unfinished stories. It wants closure, resolution, a neat and tidy ending. But life is not a book where every chapter concludes with clarity. Some stories stop mid-sentence. Some doors close without explanation. And yet, we chase, not because we believe we can change the past, but because we are afraid of accepting that some things will never be explained. Zen wisdom teaches that suffering does not come from the event itself, but from our resistance to it. The rope of attachment is not in the hands, it is in the heart. When someone cannot let go, it is not because they wish to hold on to you, but because they do not yet know how to stand without the version of themselves they were when they were with you. The young man sat in silence, his heart heavy with realization. "So what must I do?" he finally asked. The Zen master let out a quiet breath. "You must do nothing. You must allow the ripples to settle on their own. Their struggle is not yours to resolve. Their journey is not yours to complete." The young man sat quietly, his mind swirling with confusion. He had tried to let go, but the pull of the past was still there, lingering in the corners of his heart. "So what should I do? Should I go back and explain? Should I give them closure?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. The Zen master, without a word, reached down and scooped a handful of sand. He held it gently in his palm, watching as the grains sifted through his fingers, falling softly to the ground. "Some people are like the wind," the master said, his voice calm, "and some people are like trees. When the wind moves on, the tree does not chase it. It simply sways and waits." The young man frowned. "But does that mean I should do nothing? Should I just stand still and ignore their pain?" The master's lips curved into a subtle smile. "Not nothing," he replied gently, "but do not be the one who feeds the attachment." The young man was silent for a moment, trying to understand the wisdom in the master's words. He had always thought that to truly move on, he needed to explain everything, to offer closure, to give the other person the answers they sought. But what if that only prolonged the suffering? What if by offering explanations, he only kept the attachment alive? To further illustrate his point, the master told a story from a distant land. There was once a monk, known for his deep wisdom and peaceful nature. He had a close friend, someone he trusted completely. But one day, that friend betrayed him. Instead of responding with anger, instead of confronting his friend, the monk simply walked away. When others asked how he could be so calm in the face of betrayal, the monk answered, "Because I do not give my peace into the hands of another. If they wish to fight, they will find themselves alone in battle." The young man was struck by the monk's response. It was so simple, yet so profound. The monk had not sought to defend himself, nor had he tried to change his betrayer's mind. He had allowed the situation to unfold without engaging in it. By refusing to react, he preserved his peace, and the battle ceased to exist. "But how can I let them go if they keep reaching out?" the young man asked. "What if they keep pulling at the rope?" The master looked at him, his eyes steady and full of wisdom. People feed off responses. The more you explain, the more they question. The more you react, the more they pursue. Every response you give is like adding fuel to a fire that would otherwise burn out. When you engage, you give life to their struggle. You give them the opportunity to hold on longer. The young man thought about this for a moment. He realized that every time he explained himself, every time he reacted to their pain, he was feeding the very attachment he was trying to sever. He was keeping the conversation alive, even though he wanted to end it. To truly end something, the master continued, one must accept that not every ending requires a final conversation. Some things must simply be allowed to fade. Like the wind moving away from the tree. The tree does not chase the wind, it simply remains rooted, waiting for the next breeze to pass. The young man understood now. Sometimes the best way to handle someone's refusal to let go is not to engage in their struggle. You do not need to offer answers, explanations, or closure. By doing so, you prolong the pain, giving it the power to persist. The most powerful response is often silence. You are not obligated to feed their attachment, nor to explain your decisions. Instead, like the tree, you must stand firm in your peace, rooted in your wisdom, and allow them to find their own way forward. 1. Let go not just physically, but emotionally. When we decide to cut someone off, we often think that simply blocking them from our phone, unfriending them on social media, or avoiding places where they might be is enough to release them from our lives. But true detachment is not about physical distance, it's about emotional release. The hardest part of letting go is not the act itself, but the emotional baggage we carry with us. Think about it. If you've ever ended a relationship, whether romantic, familial, or even a close friendship, you might have physically distanced yourself from the person, but the emotions didn't go away. The feelings of resentment, guilt, anger, or even longing can linger in your heart and mind, making the severance feel incomplete. This emotional attachment can keep you bound to the past, like a thread you can't seem to cut. But if you truly wish to let go, you must do so on an emotional level as well. Buddhism teaches us that attachment is the root of suffering. It's not just about holding onto the person, it's about holding onto the feelings, the expectations, and the attachment to a certain outcome. We must learn to release these emotions in order to free ourselves from the past and move forward. True detachment means surrendering these feelings, letting go of the desire for things to have been different. When we let go emotionally, we free ourselves from the burden of carrying past pain and regret. 2. Understand that they are not clinging to you, but to themselves. This is one of the most profound realizations that can help you truly understand detachment. When someone refuses to let go, it often feels personal. We think they are holding on to us, our presence, our love, our connection. But the truth is, they are not clinging to you. They are clinging to themselves, to the version of themselves they were when they were with you. Think about the people in your life who have caused you emotional pain or struggle. Often, the attachment they have to you is not about who you are, but about what you represent to them. They are holding on to their identity, their sense of self-worth, or the emotions they experienced with you. They are resisting the loss of that identity, that connection, that version of themselves that they were when they were in your life. This insight is critical for understanding why some people struggle to let go. They are not resisting the loss of you. They are resisting the loss of who they were when they were with you. This shift in perspective allows you to stop taking their attachment personally. It helps you understand that their pain is not a reflection of your worth or your actions. It is about their fear of change, their resistance to the inevitable passage of time. People often struggle because they do not want to face the reality that things change, and that they must change with them. But you are not responsible for their growth or their journey. They must come to terms with their own transformation, just as you must with yours. 3. Silence is the most powerful response. One of the most powerful tools in the art of detachment is silence. It is easy to feel the pressure to explain ourselves, to justify our decisions, or to offer closure to someone who is struggling to let go. But not every situation requires an explanation. Sometimes, the most compassionate and powerful response is simply to remain silent. Silence is not a rejection, it is a reflection of peace. When you stop explaining, defending, or justifying yourself, you stop feeding the attachment. Every word you say can create more ripples in the water of an already turbulent situation. But silence allows the water to settle. It gives both you and the other person the space to reflect, to process, and to heal without the added noise of unnecessary explanations. Think about how often we feel compelled to explain ourselves when someone is upset or in pain. We want to make them feel better, or we fear that they won't understand our actions. But explanations often lead to more questions, more misunderstandings, and more attachment. By staying silent, you are not denying them closure, you are allowing them to find their own closure in their own time, without you adding to the emotional burden. Silence is also a form of self-care. When you are not constantly engaging with someone's emotional needs or trying to fix things for them, you create space for your own healing. You protect your peace and maintain the clarity of your boundaries. 4. You are not responsible for their emotions. One of the hardest things to accept when you are cutting someone off is the feeling of responsibility for their emotions. We often feel guilty when someone is hurt, angry, or upset because of our decisions. But it's important to remember that you are not responsible for their emotions. Their struggle to let go, their pain, their anger, it is not yours to carry. Every person is responsible for their own emotional journey. They must learn to process their feelings, just as you must learn to process yours. It is natural to feel empathy and compassion for someone else's pain. But you cannot take on the burden of their emotions. Doing so only prolongs your own suffering and prevents both of you from moving forward. Buddhism teaches us that we must cultivate compassion, but not at the expense of our own well-being. We cannot rescue others from their pain, nor should we expect them to rescue us from ours. Each person must take responsibility for their own healing process. If you are constantly trying to ease someone else's suffering at the cost of your own peace, you are only enabling the attachment to persist. Let go of the guilt that comes from someone else's emotional turmoil. Recognize that their pain is their own, and that they must learn how to heal without your intervention. 5. Everything passes in time. The final aspect of true detachment is the understanding that everything, even the deepest pain, eventually passes. Like clouds drifting across the sky, emotions change. What feels unbearable today will not feel the same tomorrow. What seems impossible to release will, in time, loosen its grip on you. One of the most comforting truths in life is the impermanence of all things. Nothing, no emotion, no relationship, no experience, lasts forever. This includes the pain of letting go. It may feel overwhelming now, but with time, it will fade, you will heal, you will move on. This is a key insight in the Buddhist teachings of impermanence. When we accept that everything is temporary, we can learn to let go more easily. We can trust that whatever we are feeling right now is not permanent, and that with time, the emotional storm will pass. In the same way, when we allow others to experience their own healing, we trust that in time, they too will find peace. They will come to terms with the changes in their life, just as we are learning to do. The art of true detachment is not about erasing memories or forcing yourself to forget. It is about understanding that everything, including pain, will pass. It is about trusting in the flow of life and accepting that change is inevitable. The more we embrace this truth, the easier it becomes to let go and move forward, with peace in our hearts. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean. The waves crash relentlessly against the shore, their force unyielding, much like the struggle of someone who refuses to let go. Each wave rises with power, surging forward, only to crash, retreat, and then return again with even more intensity. The person who is unwilling to let go is much like these waves, driven by emotions, by attachment, by the desire to hold onto something that is no longer theirs to keep. In this moment, you may feel the urge to fight against the waves. You may want to shout at the ocean, to command it to calm down, to explain why the waves should not crash against the shore. But what would happen if you tried to control the ocean? What if you spent your energy battling the tide, only to find that the waves never stopped, that they would keep coming, regardless of how much you fought against them? The truth is, you cannot control the ocean, and you cannot control another person's struggle to let go. The only way to find peace is not to resist, but to step back and allow the ocean to be what it is. In the same way, when you cut someone off, especially someone who is deeply attached to you, their struggle to let go will not be easy. But their struggle is not yours to bear. In the face of their emotional turmoil, your task is to remain like the sky. The sky, vast and unshaken, watches the waves crash and recede. never disturbed, never overwhelmed. The sky remains at peace, unaffected by the turmoil below. Similarly, your only job is to stay grounded in your own peace. You do not need to engage in the struggle, nor do you need to justify your actions. You simply need to be at peace with your decision, knowing that in time, things will settle, just as the wind eventually calms and the ocean finds its stillness. So too will the person who struggles with letting go eventually find their way. Their emotional storm will pass. Time, as it always does, will bring healing. The waves will subside, and the person will come to terms with the loss, just as you have. It is important to trust in the natural course of things, to trust that each person must find their own path to peace. Just as you have done in your journey of detachment, remember that you are like the sky, vast and unshaken. The emotional waves of others may crash against you, but you do not need to fight them. You do not need to explain yourself, justify your actions, or engage in their struggle. Your peace is yours to maintain, and in time, the storm will pass. So, let go like the ocean. Let the waves crash and recede, knowing that you are not meant to fight the current. Your peace will remain, and so will your strength. The tide will change, and everything, as it always does, will find its way.